children of all ages. Staywood Network proudly brings you Cards Subject to Change with Hassel. So today's episode, guys, is an episode that when I first thought of what this show was going to be a few months back, this was one of the first ones I thought of doing. And I've kind of put it on the back burner. I've been excited about doing it. And I'm going to be honest, now that I've got to it, upon working on this episode, I was scratching my head a whole lot because of the muddled mess WCW had became by this point. So, for those of you who are wondering, we're tackling today, what if the NWO 2000 had not been snakebit from the start? So what I mean by snakebit from the start, just to give you a little back history into what it is. So in December of 1999 at Starrcade, they started, just before Starrcade, they started planting the seeds of an NWO reformation, but you didn't really know what it was. You kept seeing things with the bands getting back together, the bands getting back together. You don't know. Bret Hart is actually a face at the time. He's a champion. He's entered into a feud with the Goldberg. They were the tag champs. They lost tag championships to the Outsiders. Various things of this nature. But Bret is still playing the good guy, so to speak. Then you have just this muddled mess of a finish at Starrcade. And on top of that, the kick. That's right. You know what I'm talking about when I say the kick at Starrcade, where Bill Goldberg, as Bret the Hitman Hart would say, erroneously just blasted Bret's head off his shoulders. Bret would continue to work over the course of the next few weeks as he did not realize the severity of his injury for a little while. But Bret Hart goes down. Okay, a few weeks later, Bill Goldberg injures himself as he Jack Perry's a down window on a limousine, not realizing it wasn't the gimmicked glass. He busted open, sliced himself through here, almost losing his arm, you know, and going out effectively for about 9 months himself. Then you had Hall, who went into rehab. So they replaced Hall with Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner, and I'm fine with that. I actually enjoy Scott Steiner in the NWO, and Bret, Steiner, Nash, Jarrett, NWO is still a very elite group. I was fine with that. You know, I'd have liked to see Hall return had it not dissolved like it did. Towards the end of January, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn defect with the Vanilla Midget crew over to the WWF, so they lost those guys. Chris Benoit was champion, mind you, because he won the title on his last night. That was a top deal. Randy Savage returns looking jacked, looking in great shape. Creative has nothing for him. He's gone by summertime. Come summertime, you get the Hogan and Jarrett mess at Bash at the Beach where Hogan is gone. It just really falls apart. Jarrett himself gets a back concussion after working with Superfly Jimmy Snuka. Excuse me. So he himself gets injured, and while he continues to work, he's just not himself. It fell apart at the seams. Like everywhere it could, it fell apart. And then it just continued to fall apart for WCW as well. Like I said, they had the lawsuit with Hogan. Vince Russo was an idiot. They brought Bischoff back and they really tried to do something with the Millionaire Club and the New Blood. But unfortunately, it was starting to wane a little bit. Now, I will say this right now, and this is something that anyone who is actually a true historian of the business, WCW is going to go out of business regardless. It has nothing to do with how creative they were at the time, how uncreative they were, the product being shit, because, okay, at their low, I went back in my research and tracked, over the course of their 2000 to 2001, when Vince bought them in March of the next year, they averaged on a low 2.0, which is 2.5 million viewers, up to about a 4.9 occasionally. So they were still pulling in a good rating. Those are better ratings than Raw and SmackDown today, by far. SmackDown does about a 2, and Raw does a 1.8. I know we got streaming now, and it's a little more muddled. I'm just telling you, 2.5 million people a week is not turning into Raw or SmackDown, either show. I'm sorry, it's just not in the U.S. So WCW was still commanding a large portion of the market. But Time Warner, being Time Warner, they just did not want wrestling. So at the end of the day, no matter what we book here today or what they had booked during that time, it was going under, one way or another. But what we could book here today not only would be fun for us, once you get past all the malarkey, so to speak, but it would definitely set up a much different WCW invasion the next year. So what if? Let's dive in. So for our what if, we're going to go ahead and just take all the rules off the table. I'm Infinity Gauntleting this thing. I'm Thanosing. And as a result, Bret does not receive the kick. Goldberg does not injure himself like a moron. Hogan does not, and Jarrett do not do their little deal. Macho Man hangs around. The Vanilla Midgets stay in WCW because with Bret there, Bret and not being injured, Bret is able to talk Chris, who is the ringleader of them, into staying, thus effectively giving us some really good matchups down the pike. So, are you ready? Let's do this. What if at Starrcade 1999, we have a matchup between Bret the Hitman Hart and Bill Goldberg. During the course of the match, we get much of what we got that night, a physical encounter. But instead of having the just goofy finish that made no sense at the end with Piper, Bret starts to wane a little bit towards the end of the match. Goldberg proving to be a powerhouse, a brute, and just starting to get the upper hand. Then out of nowhere, Scott Hall with his taser for the second year in a row shows. Tasers Bill Goldberg, setting up Bret Hart for the victory. Now, on paper, this makes Bill Goldberg think it's a Scott Hall issue because just a year prior, he helped his buddy Kevin Nash win the world title. So, the next night on Nitro, Bret is playing oblivious. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know why this is happening. He tells Bill Goldberg, hey, me and you tonight, we will team up together and we will face the Outsiders here on Nitro for the WCW Tag Team Championships. What if? What if in the main event of that night, they're going two on two, and during the course of the matchup, out of nowhere, comes Jeff Jarrett, who blasts Goldberg over the top of the head with the guitar, the stroke, setting up Hall and Nash for the win, and the formation. The band is back together, people. We have NWO 2000. Now, I will say, I have never been a fan of anything 2000, whether it be LOD 2000, Team 2000, whatever. Or the only thing worse than that is when they go, the new Rockers, the new Midnight Express. That's almost a kiss of death. Mwah, dead. On this right here, we had an elite group. It made sense. So, the NWO is reformed. The next week on Nitro, they come out together and tell everyone what morons they were for not seeing the writing on the wall. They told them for weeks, people, the band is back. Then, out of nowhere, the Crippler, Chris Benoit's music plays. The Crippler walks out there, shaking his head, saying, what's wrong with you, Bret? Stu would be ashamed of you right now. You are someone who stood for virtue and truth and justice, and here you are aligned with these monsters. What if? What if Chris Benoit challenged Bret the Hitman Hart at Sold Out that month for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship? Now, in our timeline, Chris Benoit will go on to beat Sid Vicious for the title and become the champion, but leave to go to WWF. Not in this timeline. In this timeline, Bret tells the NWO, hey, I want to show that I am the man tonight. Unlike Hogan, who needed you guys every twist and turn, I'm going to show why I am the man and a better and effective leader of the NWO. Tonight, I don't need any help. What if? What if in the main event they had an epic battle for technical supremacy? Just back and forth, great matchup, one of the all-time greats. But ultimately, Bret Hart slaps a sharpshooter on Chris Benoit, who has no other option but to tap out. Bret Hart wins, retains the WCW Championship. Now, at this point, although he did fight with honor and valor, the NWO would arrive and they would stomp the shit out of Chris Benoit. The Revolution would try to come down, and they would not have any better luck. NWO smashing all of them, spraying them up, running roughshod, doing what NWO be doing, people. What if? What if the next night on Nitro, Sid Vicious, of all people, comes out there and tells Brett, says, "You little crybaby, I used to beat you in WWF, and I'm going to beat you here too." He says, "Chris Benoit, you need somebody to watch your back in a tag match tonight. How about me and you, little man, versus Bret the Hitman Hart and Scott Hall?" What if? What if in the main event, it starts out with Chris Benoit, Nash and Bret, they do a good job of commanding respect in the ring. They do a good job of keeping Chris cut off from making the tags. Multiple times him almost making the tag just to get yanked back. Really building that sympathy, so to speak. What if? What if when he's finally able to make the hot tag, Sid drops off the apron, much like he did Hogan years earlier. Looks at Benoit and just does his psycho laugh. What if? What if at this point the NWO beat Chris Benoit, then jumps back into the ring Sid Vicious, who puts not one but two power bombs on the crippler. Then Nash would reach into his pocket, pulling out a large envelope full of money, giving it over to the insurance policy, Sid Vicious. Now, Sid is not part of the NWO, mind you. This is where Sid will enter into a whole deal where he is a hired gun for the top dollar over the next few months. What if? What if the next week on Nitro, Bill Goldberg comes out and says, "I want a match. I want my rematch. Bret, you owe me." What if? What if they set up a match at Uncensored? Bret the Hitman Hart versus Bill Goldberg in a ladder match. Now, Bret is the creator of the ladder match, whether he gets credit for it or not. May not have been an innovator, but he was the creator. What if? What if at Uncensored, during this matchup, Goldberg, much like before, he's edging ahead with power and strength. He's just doing his thing, looking very much like he's about to get the win. When Scott Hall and Kevin Nash come out again, this is a ladder match, no DQ. They put them fangs on Bill Goldberg. What if? What if then Bret the Hitman Hart steals the win in the title, regaining and retaining the WCW Championship that night? What if? Now, the next night on Nitro, Bill Goldberg would be extremely pissed off. He would not be doing well because in the clause of the contract would have been Bill can no longer challenge for the WCW Championship as long as Bret has it. So what if he goes to seek his revenge and takes out Scott Hall, putting him effectively on the shelf? Now, this will be a good cover for Scott to go into rehab, maybe put his demons to rest for a little while. What if? What if, with the odds no longer seeming to be in the NWO's favor, Kevin Nash looks at Bret and says, "I've just contacted him. He'll be here next week." Show closes, leaving you in suspense. Who is it? Who is this masked man that they have called? What if? What if the next week on Nitro, Bill Goldberg tells Nash, "You're next. I'm challenging you next." During the main event, Bill Goldberg and Kevin Nash, they go back and forth having a mediocre match. Let's face it, these two are only going to have such a good match, right? When out of nowhere comes Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner, pipe in hand, blasting Goldberg in the back. Scott Steiner is the newest member of the NWO. What if? What if Bret tells the guys, "Okay, now it's time for everybody to get a little gold, get a little rub. Scott, you're going to fill in for Hall with free bird rules. You're one half of the tag team champions with Kevin Nash. I got the world title. But JEFF, JARRETT, ha ha ha. That's right, Double J. You don't have no gold. You got to hold your weight around here if you're going to be part of NWO. So tonight you will challenge for the U.S. Heavyweight Championship against none other than Diamond Dallas Page." What if? What if on this night, Jeff Jarrett, by hook and crook, he wins the U.S. Championship, solidifying the group of all having titles at this point. What if? Now, what if going into Bash at the Beach, things are starting to get a little chaotic there. The NWO, they're having their peaks and valleys. There's distrust, with Bret seeming to be a little distrustful of Nash, so to speak. He's kind of on the same page with Steiner a little bit. He's seeming to be okay with Jarrett, but him and Nash, they're just not really doing this. Too much alpha male, so to speak. But what if at Bash at the Beach, Scott Steiner and Kevin Nash have to defend the tag team championships against Chronic? Chronic by this time is on the rise, and Brian Clark and Brian Allen was a beast of a tag team. The fact that the WWF did not give them a better run than what they did is just mind-blowing to me, because they had the look. While they weren't technicians, they were your 2000 era Road Warriors all day long. Just believable badasses. And in their tag team championship match against Nash and Scott Steiner, who ain't nothing finer, Chronic would come out with the victory after Bill Goldberg jumps Nash from behind, taking him out, distracting the ref, allowing Chronic to put their move on Scott Steiner and get the 1, 2, 3. What if? What if later in the night at Bash at the Beach, Jeff Jarrett, who's been defending his U.S. Championship left and right, loses his United States Championship to none other than Latino Heat himself, Eddie Guerrero, in a great epic back and forth battle? What if? But what if in the main event? The main event! It's none other than Bret the Hitman Hart versus a returning Hollywood Hulk Hogan. That's right, people. Hulk Hogan has returned, and he says, I am the originator of the NWO. Bret, you're just warming my spot for me. Get the hell out of the kitchen, brother, because it's time for me to take over. Take that championship and my spot as ruler of the NWO. What if? What if over the course of this matchup, they have a pretty solid matchup with Bret pulling a really great match out of Hogan. Now, the Hollywood would show that he still has some immortal in the tank on this night, getting the upper hand on Bret on more than one occasion, looking as if he's about to drop the leg drop when out of nowhere Scott Hall returns. Now, he distracts the ref, but while he has the ref distracted, this will be when none other than the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, jumps out from the crowd, attacking Hogan from behind, allowing Bret Hart to get the win. Now, Scott Hall would be legitimately confused, as this was not part of their plan. He does not know where this even came from. But what if? What if the next night on Nitro, the NWO come out minus Davey Boy Smith? Hall and Nash go to questioning Bret the Hitman Hart. Like, what's up with this? This wasn't part of our plan. You don't trust us? In which the Hitman would be very honest and say, no, I didn't know where Scott Hall's loyalty really lied. Was it with me or was it with Hogan? You guys do have history. So do we. So I didn't know, and I had to make damn sure that I had someone I could trust. Thus setting up a little bit of tension, so to speak. What if? What if at the great that night on Nitro, for the number one contendership at the Great American Bash, Booker T wins a championship contender matchup, solidifying himself as the number one contender against Bret the Hitman Hart at the Great American Bash? What if? What if at the Great American Bash, the Outsiders have already lost their tag team championships? Jarrett has lost his United States Championship. What if on this fateful night right here, no matter who it was, how it went, in a fair one-on-one clean matchup, Booker T pulls out the W on this fateful night against Bret the Hitman Hart, giving him his first of many WCW championships? What if? What if the next night on Nitro, The NWO comes down to the ring and they are not happy. They are just in disarray. Bret telling the outsiders he can no longer trust them, especially going into war games. He wants some people to have his back that he knows he can trust. Signaling for the British Bulldog to come down to the ring and effectively join the NWO. What if? What if they look at Scott Steiner then and tell him, tonight's the night for you to earn your keep. You've done lost a few key matchups. So tonight, against the United States champion, Eddie Guerrero, you're going to bring the title back home. And if you don't bring the title back home, you don't got a home. What if? What if later in the night during that matchup, Scott Steiner and Eddie Guerrero have a really great back and forth matchup. But Scott Steiner being able to not only have the power game against Eddie, but keep up with the lucha style. Let's face it, people. He is the creator of the Frankensteiner. He was one of the first people in the U.S. doing 450 splashes. Steiner was a beast at this point. Before and then. This is before he gets dropped foot, mind you. What if? But what if on that night, Eddie Guerrero is just a little bit better. And out of nowhere, he pinned Scott Steiner with a schoolboy. After Scott Steiner continues to play with him, toying with him instead of going ahead and defeating him. What if? Now, this will not sit well with the rest of the NWO as they come out the next week on Nitro and they got to run the Steiner down. And the second the Steiner goes to kind of stand up for himself, Jeff Jarrett and the British Bulldog would blast him, attacking him. Now, Hall and Nash would seem to be a little conflicted on this right here. But Bret would look at him and tell them to earn their keep. Put them things on him, so to speak. At which point they do. They're not happy about it, but they do. Booker T, of all people, and Eddie Guerrero come running down to the ring and make the save. What if? What if going into War Games, the match beyond, it's going to be Team NWO, but out of nowhere, Eric Bischoff, of all people, returns, telling the NWO, you know what, while this little cosplay reunion's been fun, I've enjoyed it for a spell, but at the end they say imitation is a sophisticated form of flattery. I'm no longer flattered. You don't impress me. So, NWO at War Games, you will face off against the new WCW champion, Booker T, the immortal Hulk Hogan, Sting, Bill Goldberg, and the unpredictable Scott Steiner. What if? What if at War Games? Now, the NWO would not be on the same page for this right here. This would not be a good deal. So, with this being said, eventually during the match, Scott Steiner would get the win for Team WCW as he made none other than Kevin Nash submit to the Steiner recliner. What if? What if the next night on Nitro, Bret Hart comes down to the ring with only Davey Boy Smith, telling Hall and Nash, I'm done with you. I can't trust you no more. You don't pull your end of the weight no more. It's over. Jarrett, you're on your own as well. Now at this point, out would come Hall and Nash, who would look at him and say, nah, you don't tell us when it's over. You're damn right it's over, but you're out. Not the other way around. At this point, Bret and the Bulldog would say, how about tonight we go one-on-one in a tag team matchup. It's a 202. I apologize, people. I said it's WCW. It's crazy. It is. Hall and Nash would have regained the tag team championships by this point and enter into a tag match in the main event of Nitro against the Bulldog and Bret the Hitman Hart for the WCW World Tag Team Championship. What if? What if in this main event, the outsiders are looking in rare form? They're looking like they're going to pull it out of nowhere. Then, none other than the insurance policy himself, Sid, comes down to the ring. Now, this is going to distract people. They're going to be looking and saying, what's going on with Sid? When out of nowhere comes none other than Canada's finest, the Crippler, Chris Benoit. He's on one side of the ring. Then out of nowhere on the other side of the ring, someone that was not expected at all, none other than the Macho Man, Randy Savage. Now, the Macho Man was jacked at this point. They gang out the Outsiders, setting up Bret and the Bulldog to win the tag team championships. Everyone's scratching their head like, where did this alliance come from? Who are they? What's going on here? What if? What if the next night, the next week on Nitro, Bret the Hitman Hart, along with the British Bulldog, Sid Vicious, Chris Benoit, and the Macho Man all come down to the ring at the same time. Now, they're not sporting NWO attire. They say, the Federation is here, people. That's right. We're not a group of, I don't have to lead here, is what Bret tells them. He says, we can be a group of equals. For the first time, we don't have to interfere in everybody's matchups because we're equal. We can all pull our own weight. And moving forward, we're going to prove that. Starting at Halloween Havoc, where Bret says that him and the Bulldog will defend the tag team championships against a team that the Outsiders couldn't get it done against, Chronic. Then he looks at Sid and says, big man, I got something for you. You've been there for me a couple of times. Now I'm going to be there for you. You've got a United States Championship matchup against none other than Eddie Guerrero. It's time for you to get it done. What if? Then he would look at Chris Benoit and say, Chris, it's your time to shine. It's long overdue. You're a product of the dungeon, and it's time for you to be the man around here. You've carried the load for far too long for the Horsemen and the Flares and jerks like that. It's time for you to be the man. So at Halloween Havoc against Booker T, you will get a World WCW Championship spot. What if? Then he would look at the Macho Man and say, there's only one thing left for you to do, Mach, and that's to win the World Television Championship. What if? What if at Halloween Havoc, the Federation runs shop. They run the table. Everyone winning their effective championship. What if? Solidifying them as the new thing coming at the tail end of 2000, going into Starrcade. Now, we would still have World War III to go. We would still have Starrcade. And we could have a really great Starrcade at this point. But I want you to tell me where you think this would go from there. Would this lead into the next year? Would some of these guys have actually transferred over into the invasion, leading up to a really good invasion versus that mess that we did get at the hands of Vince and his crew? Drop me a comment, let me know. Like I said, this was one I was super excited initially to do, and then when I got to working on it, even I was like, there's just too many moving parts with what was on hand then. It was like, Russo made a mess of some things. So with the players you had on hand, it was a lot to take in. So I appreciate you guys. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know where you think it would go, how you would have played it out. Would you have done some similar things, some different things? Let me know. But remember, at the end of the day, the card is always subject to change.